Tomorrow, all eyes will be on Johannesburg as it hosts the African Growth and Opportunity Act. U.S. officials and their African counterparts will discuss Washington's flagship trade program for the continent. AGOA provides duty-free access to the U.S. market for most agricultural and manufactured products exported by eligible African countries. Now, the trade pact has been renewed twice already and is due to expire in September 2025. Earlier, we spoke to Professor Adrian Saville, GIBS Professor of Economics, Finance, as well as Strategy.
You know, what South Africa has been trying to do is to be ambidextrous, facing left and right at the same time. And, you know, that's a real challenge in any circumstance, to try and be, you know, ambidextrous or, two things, presenting yourself, you know, on one hand and on the other hand. But that is the exact circumstance that is required here, because you've got the West, which has, the North, which has a set of requirements and expectations, a set of principles and strong historical relationships with South Africa, and at the same time you've got the East, which is a rapidly emerging, or the South, rapidly emerging, fast-growing, and quickly becoming a strong economic partner and ally. So you have to look after the past and embrace the future in the exact same moment.
And I wonder, Prof, how do we then begin to do this? How do we manage our international relations while also protecting the economy?
Yeah, I think South Africa can take guidance from countries that have done this, in the past and have been very successful. We can also take lessons from countries that have tried to do this and not been as successful. Examples of this successful and less successful that spring to mind include the likes of Turkey, which sits, impeccably positioned between East and West, Costa Rica, which has strategically used its geographic positioning very successfully, Singapore, the Netherlands, or more exactly Rotterdam, and in most recent times, I think India gives a good case in point of how you're able to look after relationships that in other circumstances might be very, very stressed or challenged.
And, our viewers, sometimes we take it for granted that these things are obvious because we deal with them all the time. I mean, we talk about, for example, the importance of AGOA when, one thinks about the duty-free access to markets, for example. But let's talk about the importance of this particular agreement for South Africa and the United States, for somebody who doesn't understand.
When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, so what the agreement has intended to do historically is provide access for manufacturers, producers in African economies, access to large and important markets, the North American market. That's the intention of the agreement. If we look at the specific impact and the exact economic contribution when we get down to the nuts and bolts of it, in the greater scheme of things, the contribution is actually very modest. It really hasn't been this spectacular needle changer in terms of driving economic growth or industrial competitiveness. It really has been at the margin. But what we shouldn't take away from this is the spirit and the intention, and that what it really represents is an alignment of interest. So whilst when we look at the fine detail of the act, and it can be picked apart for not having made significant or substantial economic or industrial contributions, what you don't want to take away from is the alignment of economic interest that sits underneath this.
And Prof, then finally, how worried should we be about the fact that, some of the African countries are set to be removed from this particular agreement?
There's very specific conditions in the agreement that if you don't comply or conform with certain conditions, most obviously things like human rights observation and respect or protection of human rights is one of the terms that gets you removed. And we've seen a couple of African countries removed for exactly a violation of specific clauses of the agreement. South Africa does not want to fall in that bucket. This is not a group that you want to be associated with. And for that reason alone, I think South Africa should be very concerned about its membership of the Act, and at the same time, cognizant that there are historical relationships we need to look after, whilst there are new emerging relationships that we want to try and embrace. And that is the ambidexterity that South Africa needs to demonstrate, the diplomacy that South Africa needs to demonstrate.